So, good morning, everybody. We're starting today from Daf Chof Tes Amud Base at the bottom of the page, 2 lines from the bottom of the page. In the middle of the line, it starts with Itmar, right? So now it's Itmar. It was said, what happens when Pasha Shkolim falls out in the week that everybody in synagogue would be reading the Pasha of Ata Tetzaveh? What's the problem? Well, the problem is, as I'm going to share with you right now on the screen, is that the Torah reading, right? The Torah reading for Tetzaveh comes right before Kisisa. So, what are you going to do? Are you going to read the whole Pasha Tetzaveh and then read Kisisa, right? Or is there perhaps another way to do it? Because what we'll see, the Gemara is going to raise as a possible confusion is people might assume that you're not reading anything extra for Pasha Shkolim. They're just going to think that the guy ran a stop sign. He just continued reading, but reading for Parshas Kisisa, not realizing, no, he was reading for Parshas Shkolim. So let's do it inside. Let's see what the Gemara says. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yitzchok Nafcha said, here's what you should do. You're going to have 6 people instead of 7 people being called up to read the Parsha of the week, which is V'ata Tetzaveh. The 6th person will finish the reading of the Torah when you reach the beginning of next week's Parsha, which is Parshas Kisisa. And then V'chad, which is the 7th person, that one person is going to be called up to read Mikisisa ad Vasisa. He's going to read, let me share this again with you for a second. He's going to read this portion over here, from Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe Leimar, Kisisa Esrosh B'nei Yisrael, until Lechaper al Nafshei Seichem, where you see the break over here, and then it starts Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe Leimar Vasisa Kir Necheshes. So the 7th guy is going to be reading from the beginning of Parshas Kisisa till the part of the Vasisa Kir, which is just the portion we're going to read, the portion about the Shkolim, right? About the Machzis HaShekel. Okay, that's according to, yes.
Why does he say Ad Ve'asita? Why doesn't he say
Until
Lechaper al Nafshotechem?
That's a good question. I think because it's just a way of speaking. He's saying until the next portion. In other words, there's the paragraph of Kisisa, and then there's the paragraph of Vasisa, Kir Necheshes. So he says you read from the beginning of the paragraph of Kisisa till the end of that paragraph, which is the beginning of the next paragraph, Vasisa. He could have said it the other way. I'm not sure why he said it till Vasisa. It's just giving you a reference. But he could have said Lenafshei Sechem. I think you're right. So Abaya says he doesn't like the suggestion of Rabbi Yitzchok Nafcha. Rabbi Yitzchok Nafcha says, read the whole Parshas Tetzaveh, and the 7th guy will read Parshas Kisisa, which is the Parsha that follows right after Tetzaveh. And we're reading this, as Shmuel says, for Parshas Shkolim. So Abaya says this is no good. Abaya says, Amri, people are going to say, Ukme, who to come make me hasam. They merely concluded the reading of the weekly Parsha over there. In other words, this is not a special reading for Parsha Shkolim. It's just that Parshas Tetzaveh perhaps ends at the end of Lechaper al Nafshei Seichem. That the portion of Machzis HaShekel that you just read, that is where we conclude Parshas Tetzaveh for some reason, right? If that's the case, no one is going to know to pay attention that it's Parshas Shkolim, and we're reading this to remind you to bring up the money for the new Karbonis. So therefore, Abaya gives a different suggestion, and he says this is what you should do. What you're going to do is you're going to read the whole Parshas Tetzaveh, including the beginning of Parshas Kisisa, till the end of the portion of Machzor Shekel, which is till the paragraph V'asisa, and then Tani Vikari, you're gonna bring one guy up to go and repeat Mikisisa Advasisa. He's gonna read the portion of Kisisa again, right? The Pasha Shkolim again from Kisisa till the paragraph of Vasisa. And this way, what's gonna happen is people are gonna ask, why are you repeating it? We just read this. Why is a seventh guy being called up to repeat it? And then you'll tell them, because it's Pasha Shkolim, and we're reading this special. In other words, to avoid the problem of people not realizing that it's Pasha Shkolim, Abaya says, read from the beginning of Pasha Tetzaveh all the way through till the end of the Pasha of Shkolim, and then go back and read the Pasha of Shkolim again, so that people realize the distinction that this week is Pasha Shkolim, and that's why we're reading it. Okay, so now,
yeah. So isn't that problematic? I mean, I understand if you're adding Mosifin, then you could probably reread whatever. But the seventh one is a repetition of part of the sixth one, which might be an indication that somebody screwed up and made a mistake and wasn't caught, and therefore they're bringing somebody else up to reread this. So
it's a potential mistake that they can make, which we're going to mention something similar to that soon. But nevertheless, according to Abaya, we're not concerned about that. You're right. It is a concern that people might think, oh, the Baal Korah just made a mistake, and that's why you have to go and repeat it. But nevertheless, Abaya says that we're not concerned about that, because when they'll ask us, why did you repeat it? We'll tell them it's Pasha Shkolim, that's why. But we'll see you. We're going to raise a similar question that you just raised in a moment. Meisvei, so we're going to challenge Rabbi Yitzchok Nafka's suggestion from a brisa. It says in the brisa, if the day scheduled for Shkolim fell on the Shabbos, whose regular Torah portion is close to Pasha Shkolim, right? Which means, like in Pasha Tetzaveh, that's when Shabbos Shkolim fell out. Bein milfoneha, bein malachareha, whether on the Shabbos preceding it, or the Shabbos, or the following Shabbos, right? Which means to say, whether Kisisa fell out as the Shabbos after Pasha Shkolim, or Pashas Kisisa fell out on the Shabbos before Pasha Shkolim. Let's follow me. You've got Tetzaveh, Kisisa, and Vayakel. Those are three portions, one after the other. So now, if we're going to read Pasha Shkolim and Pasha in the week of Pasha Tetzaveh, then the following Shabbos we're going to be reading it again in Pashas Kisisa. If Shabbos Shkolim falls out on Pashas Vayakel, then we will have already read the Pasha of Shkolim in Pashas Kisisa, and then we'll read it again in Pashas Vayakel. Okay? So the Brisa says that when Pasha Shkolim falls out on a Pasha next to the regular Kisisa, whether it's before, like in Pashas Tetzaveh, or whether it's after, like in Pashas Vayakel, what do? The Brisa says, Kairin Isa, they read the Shkolim portion, the Kaiflim Isa, and then they repeat it. Now, the way we're understanding this Brisa at the moment is something that seems to fit only with Abaya and not with Rabbi Yitzchok Nafka, as the Gemara now says. Granted that according to Abaya, who says that what? That on the Shabbos, whose weekly portion is Va'ata Tetzaveh, then what happens is the portion of Shkolim is read together with Tetzaveh, and then it's repeated. So then that works with this Brisa, because the Brisa says that you repeat it. So here you've read it once, up until Shishi, you include the Pasha of Shkolim, and then you go back for Shvi, for the seventh call up, and you repeat it. So that works with the Brisa, where the Brisa says that you repeat it. Elul Rabbi Yitzchok nafcha. But according to Rabbi Yitzchok nafcha kasha, it's difficult because his view is the first six aliyahs you read from Va'ata Tetzaveh till the end of the portion of Va'ata Tetzaveh, and for the seventh you call up somebody to read the portion of the Shkolim. But then there's no repetition going on. There's no repeating. Okay, well that's the question. That's the question of the Gemara on Rabbi Yitzchok. How can Rabbi Yitzchok's opinion fit with what the Bryce is telling us to do? That when the Shabbos before Parshas Kisisa is Shabbos Shkolim, what you should do is you should repeat the portion of Shkolim. According to Abaye, it fits because he says read all the way through to the end of the portion of the end of the portion of Shkolim, and then read the portion of Shkolim again. According to Rabbi Yitzchak, no, you just read to the end of the Parsha of Tetzaveh, and then you read the Parsha of Shkolim. But that would only be reading it once. How does it fit with the Brisa? Now, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha has a very good answer. Amalach, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha says, Ula Abaya minicha. Does it really fit? Does this Brisa really fit well with Abaya? Teinach lefonah, I'll give it to you, that if the Shabbos falls out in Parshas Tetzaveh, so you're going to read Parshas Shkolim, and according to Abaya, you read it once, and then you read it again, so that makes sense. But if you look at the Brisa, what did the Brisa say? The Brisa says whether Shabbos Shkolim falls out the Shabbos before Parshas Kisisa, or whether Parshas Shkolim falls out after Parshas Kisisa. What do? It says you read Parshas Shkolim and you repeat it. So now, how does the second part fit with Abaya? La'achareha heichi mashkachas lo. If Parshas Shkolim falls out in Parshas Vayakel, you're only reading the portion of Shkolim once, even according to Abaya, because you'll first read the whole portion of Vayakel, and then for the seventh Aliyah, you'll call up somebody to read Parshas Shkolim. Because the only reason why Abaya said that you should include the portion of Shkolim in the first six call-ups is so that no one would be confused and think that you're still reading from Parshas Tetzaveh when you read it in the seventh Aliyah. That's why, according to Abaya, you repeat it. But the Brisa says that whether Shabbos Shkolim falls out on the Shabbos before Parshas Kisisa, or whether the Parshas Shkolim falls out on the Shabbos after Kisisa, never, either way, you should read it and repeat it. So therefore, says Rav Yitzchak Nafcha, Elamai Islach Lemema. How are you going to resolve this difficulty? So what are you going to say? You're going to have to say that it doesn't mean to repeat it on the same Shabbos, meaning read the portion of Shkolim twice. Rather, Kaifla b'Shabbos. It means that you're going to repeat it one Shabbos after the other, which means to say that when Shabbos Shkolim falls out in Parshas Tetzaveh, at the end of the reading of Parshas Tetzaveh, you're going to read the portion of Shkolim. What are you going to do next week? You're going to read it again. So that's what it means. You read it twice. Likewise, hachinamli kaifla b'Shabbos. So here too, when, in other words, he's answering that what does it mean when it comes to Parshas Vayakel? That Vayakel is Parshas Shkolim. He says you read it, meaning you read Parshas Kisisa, the portion of the Shkolim, in its regular Shabbos, Parshas Kisisa, and then you repeat the same thing all over again in Parshas Shkolim, right? Meaning in Parshas Vayakel. He says the same thing what it is, what the Bryce is trying to tell us about Parshas Tetzaveh. Hachinami kaifla b'Shabbos. It's not telling me that on Parshas Tetzaveh I should read the portion of Shkolim twice. It's telling me that in Parshas Tetzaveh at the end, like I said, meaning like Yitzchok Nafcha said, I'm going to call up for the seventh guy, the Aliyah, which is going to read the portion of Kisisa, and next Shabbos I'm also going to read that same portion over again because it's Parshas Kisisa. That makes sense? Okay, I'm going to assume that it made sense. So
But
so
how
far,
can, Rabbi, how can
yep.
you say that reading at two separate Shabbatot where there's a gigantic hefsek of 7 days that you say that's kofli?
Well, what it means to say is maybe we should think about if, let's say let's say Shabbos Shkolim falls out in Parshas Tetzaveh. So maybe since I've already read the first portion of Kisisa, maybe next Shabbos I should keep on reading from where we left off. Don't start and read it again. I already read it last week. It's true I read it for Parshas Shkolim, but because it worked out in such a way that it's also Parshas Kisisa the following Shabbos. So therefore, instead of going back and reading from the beginning of Parshas Kisisa, what I'll do is I'll continue this Shabbos from reading Vasisa Kior. Says the Brisa, no, you go back and repeat it, right? Does that make sense? Okay.
Well, I would have used different terminologies if in the way that you're describing. I wouldn't use the word koflim. Koflim means to double.
Right. In other words, I've read it once last week. I'm reading it again this week.
So why doesn't it say Jose v'koleh? That way at least you understand that, okay, you have to go back and you have to read it again.
Right. So koflim means double. You're doubling. You're reading it. You read it once and you're reading it a second time.
Yeah, but I mean, the way I understand koflim means to double at the same time, not if you understand what I'm saying.
I do understand what you're saying, but this is the language that the Gemara chose. The end result is the same. The end result is the same. But I understand what you're saying. All right, let's go a little bit further now. What happens if Parshas Shkolim falls out in Parshas Kisisa itself? Okay, you understand what happens? Right? Let me just explain something. According to the fixed calendar that we have right now, we cannot have Parshas Shkolim fall out in Parshas Kisisa or in Parshas Tetzaveh. So this is only something that was possible in the time of the Gemara and earlier when the calendar wasn't fixed the way it is today, right? However, today, the only times you can have Parshas Shkolim is when it's Shabbos Mishpatim can be Parshas Shkolim, Shabbos Teruma can be Shabbos Shkolim, and Shabbos Vayakov Pikudei can be Shabbos Shkolim, but not Tetzaveh and not Kisisa. So here, when we're saying if Shabbos Shkolim fell out in Parshas Kisisa itself, right, it's talking about in the times of the Gemara when this was possible. So now the question is, what do we do if Shabbos Shkolim falls out in Parshas Kisisa itself? How should we do this? Okay. So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yitzchok Nafcha says, Karushita min v'asisa, okay, ad vayakel. So let me share it again, okay? This is interesting. What Yitzchok Nafcha is suggesting over here is start Parshas Kisisa, because that's the Shabbos of the week. Start Shabbos Kisisa, not from the beginning of the Parsha. Start from v'asisa kiyar nechoshes, okay? And end off at the end of the Parsha, which is the beginning of Vayakel, like end off over there, finish the Parsha. And then what should you do? V'chad kari mikisisa v'asisa. And then one person would read the portion of Shkolim where it would be from Kisisa Sreish B'nai Sol. They'd go back and read this first paragraph. Okay? Okay. That's what he's suggesting we should do. Now, Maskivla Abayos, Abaya asked, Hashti Amri. Now people will say, Limafreyahu Dekari. He just is reading it out of sequence. In other words, perhaps, like Ezra suggested before, perhaps the guy made a mistake, right? And so he has to go back and correct it. So once he's finished the Parsha, right, he's going back to correct and to read the beginning of the Parsha, but they're not going to assume that it's Parsha Shkolim, and that's why he's doing it. So Abaya doesn't like the suggestion of Rabbi Yitzchok Nafcha, who says, start of Parshas Kisisa, one paragraph in, and at the end of the Parsha, read the first paragraph. He doesn't like that idea. because people are just going to say that he's reading it out of sequence, and that would be fine, and it has nothing to do with Parshat Shkolim. Elo Amar Abaya. So therefore, Abaya comes along and gives a different suggestion and says, no, Kari Shita Advayakel. What you're going to do is you'll have 6 people read from the beginning of Kisisa until the end of Parshas Kisisa, V'chatoni, V'kari, and one will go back and repeat and read Mikisisa ad Vasisa. One will go back and read that first paragraph again, a second time, right? Yeah. So
the word tane over here
means
is
to
what?
repeat. It means to repeat.
It's the same as
Shani. Yeah.
shone in Hebrew.
Yeah. So he's going to go back and read a second time, right? Repeat and read a second time from the beginning of Kisisa till Vatsisa. So what do we have? Shabbos Shkolim falls out in Parshas Kisisa, which is the same portion that we read for Parshas Shkolim, right? So what do? How do you make sure that people are aware that we're reading this first paragraph for Parshas Shkolim? 2 suggestions. Rabbi Yitzchok Nachman says, skip that first paragraph when you start the regular Torah portion for the week. Finish the Torah portion for the week, then go back and read the first portion again. Abai says, no, I don't like that idea, because since you didn't read it the first time, people are just going to say that you read it out of order, nothing to do with Parsha Shkolim. Therefore, he suggests read the whole Parsha in sequence, and then when you finish the Parsha, you go back and repeat it, and people will ask, well, why are you repeating it? We did this already. So you're going to tell them because it's Parsha Shkolim. So now, yeah, so far so good. Just want to make sure everybody's still with me.
Rabbi.
Yes.
So is he saying that we take out 2 Sifrei Torahs and read from the first Sefer Torah the normal Parsha, and then you roll that up? Or are we saying you roll back to the beginning?
I think it means that you roll back to the beginning. When it's in the same Parsha, it would make sense that he's suggesting that you read from the beginning. However, it could be that you, I mean, look, the way we do it in shul these days, right? So let's say if you have Shabbos Parshas Vayakel, right? And you have Shabbos Shkolim, even though they're one Parsha away from another, you still take out 2 Sifrei Torah. So perhaps, even if it's Parshas Kisisa, because what you're reading from is from at the beginning of Kisisa. And when you finish the Torah reading, you're going to be at the end of Kisisa. So what you do is you take out 2 Sifrei Torah. Yeah, possible that you have 2 Sifrei Torah.
I would think you would take out a second Sefer Torah to ensure that people understand that this is a special reading.
Well, okay, that could work too. That could work as well.
Okay.
But if you want to split hairs, you could still say maybe they put away the other Sefer Torah because they found a psul in the Sefer Torah, and that's why they took out a second Sefer Torah, because at the end we're still reading the same parsha, right? If it's Kisisa, you're still reading from the same parsha. So somebody might just assume that maybe there was a mistake in the Sefer Torah, and that's why we had to take out a second Sefer Torah.
But if that were the case, the psul would be at the end, and yet he's starting to read somewhere else, so that it's not an indication that there's a psul there.
Right, but we still have the argument that Abaya gives that people will think that you're just reading out of order, right? You're right, but you're just reading it out of order. Maybe there were 2 things. Maybe that there was a mistake in the actual Sefer Torah, and maybe there was also, he forgot to read the first paragraph, so now we're just going back to read the first paragraph. That's why Abaya is of the opinion that you should read the whole thing, including the first paragraph, and then go back and read the first paragraph again, especially for Parsha Shkolim.
Yeah,
so now,
no. What I was saying was that you take out the second Sefer Torah specifically for the Parshat Shkalim. I mean, as an indication that it's a special thing that you're reading.
Right. No, I understand that. Remember, when we're creating these rules about how you should read it and in which sequence, right? We need to consider also the possibility that a synagogue may only have 1 Sefer Torah. in which case that special distinction won't be possible. I mean, I was a rabbi of a shul where we had to borrow a Sefer Torah, and we only had one Sefer Torah. Sometimes we had two, like Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, I was able to borrow a second one, but most times we only had one. And when it came to the 4 parshas, I had to roll. I had to go back and roll from the same Torah. So when you read it in the same parsha, if you're going to just skip the first part, I'll think I'm just reading it out of order. Whereas if I read the whole thing and then I read it again, and then people will conclude that it must be a special Torah reading, and it's for Parshas Kolim.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I heard somebody wanted to ask something.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Rabbi. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, but with the example that you gave, if you're taking out the 2 Sifrei Torah at the beginning, they're not going to suspect that there was something wrong with the first Sefer Torah.
Right. So you're right. So my answer, we could skip my answer. The answer, I'd rather go with the second answer that I gave. That
Rabbi, no, your answer is good, and I'll tell you why. Because it happened to us, during COVID. We were reading, it was Simchat Torah, and somebody found a mistake in the first sefer, and we had to use the second sefer, to fix the problem that we saw in the first sefer. So it is possible that you can take out multiple Sifrei Torahs and find a mistake in one and have to use one of the others.
right.
So
Okay.
I'll just share with you a quick story that happened with me. This is when I was the rabbi in the Kiever synagogue in downtown Toronto, and it was Shabbos Bereshis, and we have like 9 Sifrei Torah in the Aron HaKodesh, of which only a few are kosher. But we had 3 Sifrei Torahs that were kosher there at least, and whoever it was that went up to open the ark gave the chazan the Sefer Torah of the Zois HaBracha, okay, and he brings it up to the bima, and they take off the cover, and instead of it being at Bereshis, it's at Zois HaBracha. So they were like, "Oh, should we take it back? Should we take it back to the Aron HaKodesh?" No, we don't do that. We say that everything is tolu b'mazel. Everything depends on mazel, and so therefore, it says even a Sefer Torah shebeheichal, even a Sefer Torah in the Aron HaKodesh depends on the mazel that it be taken out to be read. Right? You could choose from this Sefer Torah, that Sefer Torah. When you take out one Sefer Torah, that min hashamayim has been decided should be the Torah that should be taken out to be read. So we took it. Yep.
I'm sorry. Why would a puzzle Sefer Torah be kept in the Aron HaKodesh? I don't understand this. Why don't they, and when they know it's puzzle, why don't they take it out and make the corrections on it and then return?
That's a very good question, but it's beyond
not everybody's got money.
Beyond the scope of this discussion.
Yeah, but I mean, there's some very well-to-do synagogues, even in Brooklyn, I'm sure that do the same thing, because I know the Beit Knesset that I attend, they have many in the Aron HaKodesh, and for the parsha reading, they take out the Sefer Torah, but how do they know which one is puzzle? I mean, that's
there's a gottel around it. They usually put a gottel around the
outside
Torah to make a distinction that they know that it's not kosher. Anyway, going back to the story, right? So the story is that I took out I had to roll the Sefer Torah. So as I'm rolling it, you have to understand, I'm rolling from Zois HaBracha back to Bereshis. So there's at least 5 to 10 minutes where people are just sitting there. So I said, listen, everything happens for a reason. It must be that Hashem wants me to say a few words. So while I'm rolling the Torah, I started to talk about this idea that everything happens by divine providence. And even the challenges that we go through in life, they're all ordained by Hashem, and a person has to know that God gives us the strength to be able to deal with the circumstances, and so on and so forth. This went on for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then we got to Bereshis and we carried on. I get an email after Shabbos from a lady. She said, "Rabbi, I want you to know what happened on Shabbos." She said, "I came in because I wanted to make a mishaberach for somebody who is suffering with cancer in the hospital, that I was going to visit them, right? And what happened was it was delayed because of the Torah rolling, right? You had to roll the Torah. But what happened was you gave this whole 5-minute talk about how to deal with challenges and realize that everything is divine providence and there's a purpose in everything. She said, you gave me the exact right words, because when I had to leave to the hospital, right? I went to speak to the patient who was considering euthanasia, who was considering assisted killing, that death, right? And after I shared what you had said in the synagogue, that gave them the resolve not to go with the assisted, the euthanasia, and it's all because of the fact that I took out, well, not I took out, whoever it was took out the wrong Sefer Torah, and I had to roll it, and I decided on the spot to talk about how everything is divine providence and Hashem gives us the strength even when things are challenging, which helped a person to make a decision not to go with euthanasia. Anyway, that's just a side story about the taking out more than one Sefer Torah. All right, back to the Gemara. So now the Gemara says, right, that Tanya Kivose da Abaya. There's actually a brisa that supports the view of Abaya, who said what? You should read the whole portion of Kisisa and then go back and read it again. What does the brisa say? The brisa says that when Shabbos Shkolim falls out in the same parsha of Parshas Kisisa, you read Parshas Kisisa, the Kaiflinaisa, and then you go back and you repeat it. And so therefore, we have a support from a brisa in accordance with Abaya and not with Rabbi Yitzchok Nafra. Okay, I hope you're not confused yet, because the next section is slightly more confusing. However, we'll go a little bit slower, and hopefully everybody will be able to follow. Okay, the Mishnah said, what happens if Rosh Chodesh Adar fell during the week, right? Here we're understanding B'Seich HaShabbos to mean within the week. So Makdimin L'Shabbos Sha'avra. What we will do is we will advance the reading of Shkalim to the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh. Okay? So give me 1 second. I want to share something with you, okay? Hopefully you can see what I am sharing. I don't know what happened. 1 second. Let me try it again. There you go. Okay. So 1 second. I'm sorry. I just have to hold this down for a second. And there you go. Okay. Sorry about that. Here goes. Okay. I have a calendar over here. Okay. So now, in this calendar, right, the way it works out is Rosh Chodesh, if you can see over here, is on Wednesday, okay? So when Rosh Chodesh is on Wednesday, what do? We read Shabbos Shkalim the Shabbos before, okay? That fits perfectly with what we said in our Mishnah, that when Rosh Chodesh falls out in the middle of the week, when do we read Parsha Shkalim? The Shabbos before. Okay? So far, so good? Okay. I'll share this again in a minute if we need to. Okay. So now, Itma, it was said about this ruling, right? Rosh Chodesh Adar Shecholius Be'erev Shabbos. What happens if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on Friday? Right? So now the question is, when am I going to read Parsha Shkalim? Rav said, Makdimin, we read it the Shabbos before. Why do we read the Shabbos before? Well, we'll soon see. Or Shmuel says, no, you don't have to read it the Shabbos before. If Rosh Chodesh falls out on Friday, you can read Parsha Shkalim the very next day. Ma'achrin, we postpone it, which means to say we read Shabbos Shkalim, the Parsha of Shkalim, the next day on Shabbos, right after Rosh Chodesh. So now, what's the reason of Rav, and what's the response of Shmuel? Rav says the Makdimin that we advance it to the Shabbos before the Imkain, because by doing this, because if we were to read it the Shabbos after, like Shmuel says, what's going to happen is the number of days that we want to leave as interval days from when you read it to the time when the money changes arrive is going to be less than 2 weeks. And we want to have at least 2 weeks from the time when you read the Parsha of Shkalim to the time when the money changers are going to be sitting there. So let's just pull up the calendar for 1 second, okay? Okay, let's look at this, okay? So let's say Rosh Chodesh, right? Rosh Chodesh was on Friday, all right? I'm just let's just imagine that it's that instead of this is being Wednesday, this is Friday, right? So now Shabbos, which is going to be the second day of Adar, leaves how many days until the 15th? Less than 2 weeks, right? It's not gonna be a full 2 weeks from when you read it until the money changes. And that's why Rav says, I'd rather read it the Shabbos before. Let's go back to Shabbos Parshas Mishpatim and read Parshas Shkalim over there, so that by the time the 15th comes, right, you've already had a 2 week interval, so people have enough time to prepare. That's what his argument against Shmuel is. That's what Rav says. And that's why he wants us to read Shkalim before Rosh Chodesh. Shmuel Amar, but Shmuel says, no, Ma'acharin, you can read it the day after. Amar Lach, because he would reply to you, that means Shmuel would reply to Rav and say, Soif, at the end of the day, because ultimately, when Rosh Chodesh falls on Friday, when is the 15th going to fall out? The 15th is going to fall out on Shabbos. That the money changers are not going to go out to where they usually sit until Sunday. And therefore, even though you're right, if Rosh Chodesh falls out on Friday and you were to read it on the next day, which would be base, the second day of Adar, they're not 2 weeks between then and the 15th, but since the 15th is going to fall out on Shabbos anyway, so therefore you've got no problem because they're not going to go out till the day after, so therefore you would have a full 2 weeks. Therefore we can postpone it, right? We can postpone it until the following Shabbos. Now, there's another thing to consider in this whole discussion, and that is whether or not there should be an interruption between Parshas Shkalim and Parshas Zachar, okay? Because Parshas Zachar, we always want to read the Shabbos before Purim. Now, depending on when you're going to read Shabbos Shkalim, meaning what day of the month, right? That will determine whether there's going to be weeks of interruption between the reading of Shkalim and the reading of Zachar. So now, according to Shmuel, right, who says that when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Friday, so then what's going to happen? You're going to be reading Parsha Shkalim on the second day of Adar, okay? And a week later, right, you can read Parsha Zachar. This way, there's no interruption, there's no interval Shabbos between when you're reading Shabbos Shkalim and when you're reading Shabbos Zachar. Okay? So that's
Rabbi?
why. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but what I don't understand, if Rosh Chodesh falls on Friday and you're allowed to read Parshas Shekalim on Shabbat, my concern about this is that Parshas Shekalim is basically about portions of shekels. It's about money. It's about currency. Why would this be read on Shabbat? Because that encourages people to do business on Shabbat, or whether it's for communal reasons or for business purposes. I don't understand why that would be read on Shabbat, that
So
particular parsha.
I'll ask you a question. You know, Jews always ask questions, answer questions with a question, right? With a question. Has your rabbi in your shul ever gotten up on Shabbos or on Rosh Hashanah or on Yom Kippur and spoken about charity?
Yes, on during the Yom Tov, during the Chagim. Yes, I understand that.
And on
But it
Shabbos?
just seemed, but I understand that. But because you're not supposed to carry money on, but Shabbat has more of an impact. I mean, it's true on Yom Kippur, if I'm not mistaken, also. But it just seems to me that it encourages people to, it could plant it in their mind to actually do business on Shabbat.
So the answer to that is that we're not talking about business here. We're talking about charity. We're talking about contributions to the Beis Hamikdash, contributions for the Karbonos. And therefore, when we speak about it in Shul, we're saying that this time of year has come, and now is going to be a time where you have to think about making the contribution that you're going to make to the Beis Hamikdash for the Karbonos. We're not saying go therefore and do business, and then you'll be able to afford it. That's not what we're talking about. Just like when we talk about on a Shabbos prior to Pesach, we talk about Pesach cleaning. We're not saying that a person should go out and start doing things that are also to do on Shabbos in order to clean for Pesach, right? It's not what we're saying. And we're not saying that, if the rabbi gets up the Shabbos HaGadol and remind everybody that you need to kasher all your vessels in order to have them kosher for Pesach, he's not saying that that's what you should do on Shabbos. He's saying Yom Tov is coming, and since Shabbos is a time where everybody gathers together, so it's the best, most opportune time to teach the people about what's coming up. So therefore, he'll speak about things that, although on Shabbos you can't do them, but they're halachas which are related to the Yom Tov that's upcoming. So the same thing is with the Kabbalas, and that's why we read Parsha Shekalim on a Shabbos.
Nice.
Okay. So what have we said? We've said so far that Rav is of the opinion that you should read it the Shabbos before, so that you have 2 weeks till between when you're reading Shabbos Shekalim and when the money changes are coming out. Whereas, according to Shmuel, when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Friday, you could read it the day after, because either way, the money changes are not going to come out till after Shabbos, which will be after the 15th, so you'll still have 2 weeks. So now, Tanan, learned in the Mishnah, right? If Rosh Chodesh fell out within the week, Makdimim l'sha'ava, then we advance Shabbos Shkolim to the past Shabbos. Umafsikin l'Shabbos acheres, and we interrupt the reading of the 4 portions for the following Shabbos. Which means to say that when Shabbos falls out this way, you're going to have the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh, where we read Parsha Shkolim, and the Shabbos after Rosh Chodesh, we're not going to read anything, and then later on we're going to read the portion about Parsha Zah. Says the Gemara, my love, afilu be'erev Shabbos. Why can we not say that the Mishnah that we've just quoted now includes when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Friday? If so, our Mishnah is going to be reflecting the opinion of who? It's going to be reflecting the opinion of Rav, who says that when Rosh Chodesh falls out on a Friday, you read it the Shabbos before. That seems to be in line with what our Mishnah says. So Shmuel is going to answer and say as follows: no, you're not reading the Mishnah right. It's B'soich HaShabbos Dafka. The language of the Mishnah is very precise. It's saying within the week, literally within, meaning the middle of the week. Like if it falls out on Wednesday, not if it falls out on Friday, which is the end of the week. So therefore, Shmuel says that this Mishnah doesn't serve as a contradiction to what he's saying. It's talking about 2 different cases. His case that we've been dealing with is when Shabbos falls out, when Rosh Chodesh falls out on a Friday. The Mishnah, when it said that we read it the Shabbos prior, we read Shabbos Shalom the Shabbos prior, is when Rosh Chodesh falls out in the middle of the week. The middle of the week is like Wednesday, not Friday. Okay? So, Toshima, we're going to try and resolve this question by bringing a bryce. Toshima, Ezi Shabbos Rishona, which is the first week for the reading of the four portions, right? The Shabbos Shkolim, Zohar, Para, and HaChodesh. What's just the first one? Says the Brisa, Kol Shechol Rosh Chodesh Adar Lias B'Seicha, any week within which Rosh Chodesh Adar falls, right? Then Ba'afilu Be'erev Shabbos, and even if it falls on Erev Shabbos, that's going to be the first week of the four portions that we read. So now, my love, why not say Afilu Be'erev Shabbos Dumya D'Seicha? Shouldn't we be saying that the Bryce is telling us that the law about reading it the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh is even when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Friday? So therefore, Ma Toicha Maktimin, just as when Rosh Chodesh falls within the following week, that what? Maktimin, you bring it earlier, you read it the Shabbos before, Erev Shabbos Maktimin. So too, when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Erev Shabbos, on Friday, we also read it the Shabbos before, which was exactly what Rav says. On the Shmuel says, just like I was precise in the last Mishnah, I'll be precise in this Brisa as well. What does it say? It says, Kol Shechol Rosh Chodesh Adar Lias B'Seicha, right? I want you to know that you need to amend the Mishnah. Instead of reading it Lias B'Seicha, you should read it Lias Ba. Okay, so now let's do it inside. Omar Shmuel says Ba. You need to amend the text of the Brisa to say that any Shabbos on which Rosh Chodesh Adar is on it. And that's how the Academy of Shmuel would read this Brisa. They would say Ba on it, right? On which Rosh Chodesh fell out. So therefore, according to Shmuel, there's still no Mishnah or Brisa that contradicts his view that when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Friday, you read it the Shabbos after, not the Shabbos before. So the Gemara concludes by saying, you know what? This is actually a machlekes between Tanaim. Rav and Shmuel were Amoraim, but this machlekes, this dispute actually goes back to an earlier dispute, a dispute between Tanaim. Tanai, like the dispute that exists between the Tanaim. What does it say? It says as follows in a brisa. It says, "Mesargin l'Shabbosos." We alternate the Shabbos of the first two of the four portions, so that a Shabbos on which no portion is read intervenes between Shkolim and Shabbos Zachar. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, "Ein Mesargin." We do not alternate. So what do we have over here? We have as follows. According to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, he holds like Rav. How do we see him holding like Rav? Because he's not concerned about having an interval Shabbos between Shabbos Shkolim and Shabbos Zachar. So therefore he says that we alternate. You can have a first Shabbos, you read Parshas Shkolim, then you have a Shabbos where you don't read any special portion, and then afterwards you have a Shabbos which you read Parshas Zachar. Reb Shimon ben Elazar, who's the other Tana of this Brisa, he says that no, we don't alternate. What does that mean? That means he follows, or rather it's the other way around really, because Shmuel's an Amira. So Shmuel follows his view that we read it the Shabbos after Rosh Chodesh, which means on the second day of Adar, so that the following Shabbos you have Parsha Zachor right after Parsha Shkolim, so that there's no interval Shabbos where you're not reading one of the 4 special Parshas. Okay? Does that make sense? Yeah, is everybody still on the same page with me? Amar Reb Shimon ben Elazar. Shimon ben Elazar says, when do I say that we do not alternate? When Rosh Chodesh Adar falls on Friday. But in the case where Rosh Chodesh falls out sometime in the middle of the week, right? Then he has no choice but to concede that Makdim v'Koireh b'Shabbos she'avra. We advance and reread it in the previous Shabbos. Afa pishu Shvat, even though that Shabbos, let's say Shabbos Parshas Mishpatim, is going to be in Shvat. Ideally, we would like to have all the 4 portions in Adar, right? However, that's not going to work if you have Rosh Chodesh falling out in the middle of the week, because of the 2-week interval that you need between the time that you read it and the time that you collect it. So when do we say that we read it the Shabbos after Rosh Chodesh? If it falls out Erev Shabbos or it falls out on Shabbos. But if it's going to fall out in the middle of the week, then Rebbe Elazar Reb Shimon agrees that we're going to make it earlier. And that reflects the view of Shmuel. So that means to say that Shmuel adopts the view of Reb Shimon, and Rav adopts the view of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Okay, that's the end of that. Now, moving on, again, it's the same topic, but now we're not dealing with Shkolim. Now we're going to deal with the next Parsha, which is the Parsha of Zachor. So the Mishnah says, Bashniya Zachor, on the second Shabbos in Adar, right? We're going to read the portion of Zachor. So Itmar, it was taught, Purim Shechalis Be'erev Shabbos. What happens if Purim falls out on Friday? So when do we read Parsha Zachor? Rav says, Makdim Parsha Zachor. You advance the reading to the Shabbos before, and that's when you're going to read Adar, which is going to be on what day of the month? It's going to be on the 8th day of the month. Shmuel says, Ma'achrin, we postpone the reading to the following Shabbos, right? Which is going to be on the 15th. So now, what's the reason of Rav? What's the reason of Shmuel? Rav says, Makdimin, that we read the Parsha Zachor, the Shabbos before Purim. Why? So that the observance not precede the commemoration. In other words, it says that you should remember what Amalek did to you. When do we actually do the celebrate and wipe out Amalek? Right, that's on Purim, which is where we celebrate the downfall of Haman, and we make a big noise when it comes to the name of Haman, etc. So we want to have the remembrance of it before the actual doing of it, right? So that's why you want to read Parsha Zachor before Purim, right? Not after Purim, because then you'd have the Asiyah before the Zechira, if you do it the other way around. What's Shmuel's response? Shmuel says that no, ma'acharin, we postpone it. What's the reason? Amalach, he would say to you to defend himself, came in the Ika Mukafin, the Avde B'Chamesar, because you have walled cities. And the walled cities, when do they observe Purim? On the 15th. So then what's going to happen is Asiya or Zechira, V'hade Hadadika Asyan. The observance and the commemoration come together simultaneously. So therefore, since the sequence is not going to be the wrong way because of the 15th, right? Because of the people in the walled cities, so therefore all cities can read Zachor on the 15th. Okay, so now trying to resolve the question from our Mishnah. Tananit, we learned in our Mishnah, Pashniya, on the second Shabbos, Zachor, we reach Pasha Zachor. Now, Vaha Ki Mikla Rish Yarcha b'Shabbos, when Rosh Chodesh falls on Shabbos, then Mikla Purim be'erev Shabbos. Then Purim falls out on Erev Shabbos. V'katani b'shniya Zachar. Yet the Mishnah says that on the second Shabbos of Adar, Zachar is read, and that's the 8th day of Adar. Right? In which case, our Mishnah is going according to who? Rav, not Shmuel, who says that we read it the Shabbos after. Amar Rav Papa, so Rav Papa says, in order to defend Shmuel, says, "My Shnia, what does it mean? The second Shabbos. Shnia lahavsaka. It's the second Shabbos counting from the interruption, because we said that there are times, right, where you're not going to read one Shabbos after the other Shabbos in terms of the 4 Parshias being read one after the other. Sometimes you're going to have Parsha Shkolim, then an interruption, and then you're going to have Parsha Zachar. So when it says in our Mishnah that you're going to read Zachar in the second week meaning the week after the interruption. That's what it means, the second week. So which way are we going to decide this? Are we going to read it according to the first way we read it, and then it would go according to Rav, or we would go according to the second way we read it, and then it would fit with Shmuel? So Toshima, come and learn a proof from the following brisa. Ezo Shabbos Shnia, the brisa says, which is the second week for the reading of the 4 portions. Kol Shechal Purim Lies B'Seicha, any Shabbos within which Purim falls, right? That's the week of Parsha Zachar. Va'afilu be'erev Shabbos, even if Purim falls on Erev Shabbos. So now, my love, be'erev Shabbos dumya d'seicha. So now, why not say that that when it says that Erev Shabbos is the same, that the law on the eve of Shabbos is same to the law that we say that when Purim falls out in that week, the Shabbos that we read it is the Shabbos before. So ma teicha kaidmin, just like whenever Purim falls out in the middle of the week, you bring it forward. Erev Shabbos makdimin, even when Purim, so too when Purim falls out on Friday, we also bring it earlier. So Amar Shmuel, the same answer as before. Ba, don't read b'seicha, but read it as ba, meaning when Shabbos fall, when Purim falls out on Shabbos. And so similarly, there's a text of the brisa appear in the brises as they taught in the Academy of Shmuel. It says ba when Purim falls out on Shabbos itself, and therefore we could still understand, right? We could still understand that it means Shnia La'afsaka. We're going to understand the Mishnah as being the second week from the interval Shabbos, in which case, according to Shmuel, the view is that we read Parsha Zachar the day after Purim, which means on the 15th. And why is it not a problem? The reason why it's not a problem is because on the 15th day of Adar, in the walled cities, they'll be celebrating Purim, and so therefore it won't be out of sequence. You'll have the Zechira, the remembering, and the Asiyah, and the doing happening together on the same day. And I think we'll stop over here. Any questions?
Rabbi,
Yeah.
the main takeaway that I got from today's class was the story that you told about the person who handed you the Sefer Torah, and it was accidentally put by Zosa Bracha, and you had to roll it back to Bereshis, and the whole Devar Torah that you gave, and the woman and the person that you saved this person's life. That was an amazing story. That was what stands out in my mind from today's class.
All right. All right, Kevra. I'll see you tomorrow in Mitzvah Hashem. All the best.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye, everyone.